The warm summer breeze drifted through the Asheville dance hall, carrying the faint scent of bourbon and leather. I sat at the bar, nursing my third beer of the night, watching June dance with our friends on the crowded floor. My wife of 5 years moved with natural grace, her sundress swaying to the rhythm of the country music. The neon signs cast a soft blue glow across her face, making her look even more beautiful than the day I married her. That's what made it all so damn hard to believe. Another round, Josh? Ben, the bartender, gestured to my empty bottle. I nodded, though my mind was elsewhere, replaying Terry's drunken words from 2 nights ago. The revelation had hit me like a punch to the gut. My perfect marriage wasn't so perfect after all. June and I had built what I thought was an enviable life in the foothills of the Smoky Mountains. I'd worked my way up from truck driver to regional sales manager, while she'd become a respected nurse at the county hospital. Our white frame house sat on 2 acres south of Waynesville, with plenty of room for the garden she'd always wanted. We were the couple others looked up to, the ones who seemed to have it all figured out. Until Terry's loose lips changed everything. "It's not fair," she'd slurred, leaning close to me at our usual table. "June's got 2 well-off guys, and we don't have any." The other nurse beside her had giggled, too drunk to realize what they were revealing. "Charlie's loaded, and he's great in bed too." Oops, should I not have said that? Charlie. The name alone made my jaw clench. I'd noticed him at the dance hall before, always hovering around our group, always finding excuses to dance with June. She'd introduced him as an old high school friend, but the way his hand had lingered on her shoulder told a different story. I took another long pull from my fresh beer, watching as Charlie himself appeared on the dance floor. Right on schedule, like a vulture circling its prey. June's face lit up when she saw him, and something inside me cracked. I've been working Tuesday and Wednesday nights lately, staying overnight in Sevierville, Tennessee. June had Tuesdays off. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. The following Tuesday, instead of staying in Sevierville, I drove back to Waynesville. I parked my truck in the upper field across from our house, killed the lights, and waited. The radio played softly, a baseball game I couldn't focus on. Around midnight, 2 sets of headlights appeared from the direction of town. My hands gripped the steering wheel as June's car pulled into our driveway, followed by a sleek sedan. Charlie stepped out, adjusting his cowboy hat in the moonlight. They moved like teenagers sneaking around, all giggles and whispered warnings to keep quiet. The bedroom light came on, casting a warm glow through the curtains. I sat there for hours, consumed by a rage I'd never felt before. Part of me wanted storm in, to confront them, to make them feel the pain that was tearing me apart. But the smarter part of me knew that revenge required patience. For 2 weeks, I watched the same scene play out. Each time, the anger grew colder, more focused. On the 3rd week, I decided it was time to act. When their cars pulled up that night, I crossed the street like a ghost. I flattened all 4 tires on his precious sedan, then one of June's for good measure. The back door was unlocked. It always was on warm nights. I pulled out my phone and started recording as I made my way to our bedroom. The sight that greeted me would be forever burned into my memory. I flipped on the lights, and time seemed to freeze. "This seems like a pretty impossible situation," I remarked, my voice eerily calm. Charlie scrambled for his clothes while June sat there in shock, tears already streaming down her face. "Josh, please let me explain," she begged. "Just tell me one thing." I cut her off. "How many times?" "Just once, I swear, just once." I walked out without another word, grabbed a beer from the kitchen, and stepped onto the porch. Through the window, I could hear Charlie discovering his flat tires, cursing into the night. I chained his car to my truck and dragged it into Waynesville, leaving it in the Salvation Army parking lot with all 4 rims ground down to nothing. When I got home, June was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her pink robe. Joshua, can we talk? Please, can we talk about this? Not tonight. I took the remaining beers and retreated to my workshop, where the Grateful Dead's Mars Hotel played softly in the background. Sleep eventually found me, but peace didn't. The next morning, I called my boss and told him I had personal matters to handle. Then I went inside to face June. You need to pack up and go stay with your sister, I told her. You're the one who messed this up. Surprisingly, she didn't argue. Her sister and came by, and after fixing the flat tire, they loaded June's things into their cars and stayed behind to talk with me. She'd always been the sensible one. Josh, are you going to take her back? Did you know she was cheating on me? And shook her head, wiping away a tear. You two were always so good together. It breaks my heart to see this happening. Mine too, Ann. Mine too. I filed for separation papers the next day, and all hell broke loose. June, her parents, our friends, my family, everyone had an opinion. Everyone thought we could work it out, that young people make mistakes, that one indiscretion shouldn't end a marriage. They didn't know about the video, about the weeks of surveillance, about the cold, calculated betrayal. June, tell everyone the truth, or I'll make sure they all get a copy of the video and photos from your little tryst. I warned her. Something must have gotten through, because the tune started to change. Still, the pressure was relentless. Young people make mistakes. You're both young, you can figure it out. Maybe even have a couple of kids. I stopped answering calls unless they were work-related. I told June she could come by the house while I was at work to collect anything else she wanted. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. Everything we owned was tied up in the house, except for our retirement savings. No spousal support, no complications. Just the end of what I thought would be forever. June wouldn't give up, though. She showed up at restaurants where I ate, wherever I went. Her sister and dropped by frequently, bringing food and wanting to chat. At first, I wondered if and had romantic intentions, but she didn't. She was just trying to keep our fractured family together. Finally, I decided to put an end to all the unwanted attention. I called up Terry and invited her to the dance hall on Patton Street one Friday night. She accepted, and she ended up spending the entire weekend at my place. I knew she couldn't keep a secret. That was the point. Within days, the whole hospital staff, including June, knew every detail of our passionate encounter. The following weekend, I went to the dance hall alone. June was there with Charlie, performing a dance that was more foreplay than anything else. When she came to the bar afterward, tears in her eyes, I leaned in close. Listen carefully, June. I don't care how close you and this guy have gotten. You've been with him for a while, so you might as well keep enjoying it. I had a fantastic time with Terry last weekend, by the way. It was incredible. I might even do it again. Her hand cracked across my face, and the tears started flowing. Charlie looked ready to intervene, but one look from me kept him in his seat. That guy you're with? He hesitated when I motioned for him to stop. All he cares about is your body. That's all it's ever been. You've destroyed something special between us and let him into our bed, into our lives. So now you've got to live with it. I've moved on. I finished my beer and walked out, leaving her crying at the bar. Later, I heard she wasn't going out as much anymore. I didn't reach out to Terry again. She was too memorable, too intense. Instead, I threw myself into work, trying to outrun the memories of what we'd lost. My parents still invited June to BBQs, even when I wasn't around. They saw her as the daughter they never had and weren't ready to let her go. But I was ready. I needed to be. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, and I started taking different routes for my deliveries. Instead of staying on the interstate, I found myself drawn to the old mountain roads. The winding paths through the Great Smoky Mountains became my escape, my therapy. Little did I know that one broken radiator hose would lead me down a path that would change everything. But that's another story entirely. The old Catalucci Turnpike twisted through the Carolina mountains like a serpent. Locals still called it Hooch Road, a reminder of the moonshine runners who'd blazed these trails decades ago. I'd driven this stretch a dozen times without ever noticing the little white farmhouse just over the Tennessee line. But with steam hissing from under my hood and a patched radiator hose about to give out, I noticed it today. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled into the driveway. The house was pristine, freshly whitewashed walls, screens in perfect condition, a well-tended garden flourishing to one side. A split-rail fence wrapped around a green pasture that stretched toward the mountains. "Hello? Anyone home?" I called out after knocking on the wooden screen door. A face appeared at an upstairs window. "Yeah? Who are you and what do you need?" A woman's voice called down. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Josh Sutton from Waynesville. My radiator hose blew out a few miles back. Was hoping I could work on my truck and maybe get some water." "Hold on right there," she said, disappearing from view. When the door opened, I found myself face to face with two German shepherds, standing guard beside their owner. "As long as you're on your best behavior, these dogs won't bother you," the woman said. She was in her early 30s, with long dark hair pulled through a baseball cap and bright blue eyes that stood out against her tan skin. Her Grateful Dead t-shirt and snug jeans suggested someone comfortable in her own skin. "I'm Angela Thompson," she said, offering me a glass of ice water. "Those two are Duke and Daisy." The dogs sat attentively, their tongues hanging out as she mentioned their names. The cool water hit the spot, washing away the dust of the mountain road. The overhead fan dried my sweat-soaked shirt as we talked. She let me search through the old cars behind her barn for parts. I found what I needed, some flexible hoses and clamps that would work for a temporary fix. An hour later, my truck was running again, but Angela wasn't ready to see me leave. "It's getting close to supper time," she said. "Why don't you come in, wash up, and have something to eat before you head out?" The smell of home cooking made my stomach growl, overruling any hesitation I might have had. Angela had prepared a feast: smoked pork chops, mashed potatoes, collard greens, and black-eyed peas. Hot cornbread and bread pudding rounded out the meal, followed by strong coffee. It was the best food I'd tasted in years, and I told her so. "Oh, it was nothing," she said, but her pleased smile told a different story. "I don't get much company out here, and I love to cook. You stopped by at just the right time." She tossed scraps to the dogs, who hadn't taken their eyes off me since I'd entered the house. The conversation turned to the old cars by her barn. "They belong to my ex-husband," she explained, glancing away. "They've just been sitting there since he left. That 65 Fairlane could fetch a pretty penny if you ever decide to part with it. The 57 Ford pickup, too. He's been gone for 2 years now," she mused. "A guy from Knoxville came by about a year ago, offering next to nothing. Thought I was some kind of fool. As the evening light began to fade, I knew it was time to hit the road. Miss Angela, I know someone who'd be very interested in that 57 Ford if you ever think about selling. Here's my card." The invitation in my voice was clear, and from her smile, I could tell she'd caught it. "I'd really like that," she said, and I believed her. Driving home that night, I couldn't get Angela Thompson out of my mind. She'd mentioned her ex walking out 2 years ago, right around the time my own marriage had imploded. There was something about her that felt real, genuine in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. The way she moved, the way she spoke, the quiet confidence in her eyes, it all drew me in. A few days later, my phone buzzed. "Joshua? Hi, it's Angela Thompson from Cosby. You stopped by last week to fix your truck?" Her voice sent a warmth through me that had nothing to do with the summer heat. "Miss Angela, I never forget a gracious hostess. I was planning to reach out about that old Ford. That's actually why I'm calling. That and the other vehicles out here. You got me thinking about them again." We both knew the cars weren't the real reason for the call. "I'll be passing through next Thursday," I said, "but to be honest, I wouldn't mind taking a drive through the mountains tomorrow. It's supposed to be a beautiful Sunday." 30 minutes later, I was in a barber's chair in Waynesville, getting a trim. I picked up a nice Cabernet on the way home, a St. Francis that seemed special enough for the occasion. The next morning, I set out early, taking my time on the mountain roads. At Big Creek, I stopped to watch a kid reel in a brook trout, the fish flashing silver in the morning sun. When I pulled up to Angela's house, I found her in an animated discussion with a man while her dogs watched warily. Another man sat in a parked truck nearby, the scene tense with unspoken conflict. "Bill told me I could have that 65 back there," the man was saying, "in exchange for some work I did." "I don't know anything about that," Angela replied firmly. "If Bill owes you something, take it up with him." I stepped in before things could escalate. "Morning, Miss Angela. Everything all right here?" The man shot me a furious glare, but I met it with a calm smile. After they left, Angela explained about her ex-husband and the restraining order against him. We spent the afternoon going through the collection of vintage cars. The 57 Ford, 65 Fairlane, 67 Barracuda, 69 Olds 442, and a 48 Caddy, each one a piece of American history. I told her about someone I knew in Sevierville who could help sell them on commission. She listened intently, but we both knew the cars were just an excuse to spend time together. After a meal of fried chicken and all the fixings, we walked through her property. The pasture gave way to wooded mountains, a babbling brook providing nature's soundtrack. In a clearing, she turned to me. "So Josh, what's your story? Married, single, seeing someone, divorced? Where have you been and where are you headed?" I told her everything about discovering June's affair, the divorce, the pressure from family and friends to reconcile. I even admitted to dating Terry to provoke a reaction from June. Angela listened with understanding, occasionally nodding as if she'd walked a similar path. Then she shared her own story. "I got married right after high school. Biggest mistake of my life," she began. She told me about Bill's infidelity, about the other woman driving over to confess and apologize, about Bill chasing the woman to Texas, breaking into the house when Angela changed the locks, about cornering him with the dogs while she threw his belongings onto the lawn. "Getting rid of that jerk was the smartest thing I ever did," she said, smiling broadly. She worked as a nurse practitioner now, specializing in midwifery across eastern Tennessee. The farm had been her grandmother's, and despite the bad memories, she couldn't imagine living anywhere else. As the sun began to set, we made our way back to the house. Our goodbye included a warm hug and a lingering kiss on my cheek. "I might drop by one evening this week," I said. "Maybe Thursday, if I hear back from my friend in Sevierville." "I'd really like that, Mr. Josh Sutton. If I'm not out on a call, I'll give you a ring to confirm." Driving back along Hooch Road that late Sunday afternoon, I felt like a teenager with his first crush. Something was happening here, something real and unexpected and wonderful. For the first time since my marriage ended, I found myself looking forward instead of back. The mountain air seemed fresher, the curves in the road less sharp, the future full of possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine. Later that week, I'd learned that Angela had done more than just survive her divorce. She'd thrived. She'd built a life on her own terms, helping bring new life into the world while keeping her grandmother's legacy alive. But for now, I just drove, letting the warmth of her smile and the memory of her kiss carry me home. Sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, on a broken-down mountain road in the middle of nowhere. The Tuesday night catfish special at the barbecue joint hadn't changed. $9.99 for all you could eat, with all the fixings. I was reading my newspaper when they slid into my booth uninvited. Well, look who's here. The long-lost traveler," Dad said, settling in beside me. Mom and June took the seats across from us, and my heart did a familiar flip at the sight of my ex-wife. June looked stunning, and she knew I noticed. Her eyes still had that sparkle that had first drawn me in all those years ago. "So, you all just happen to be here while I'm sitting like this?" I asked, not directing the quest, eye on at anyone in particular. We come every Tuesday, Josh. You know that. Mom replied, while June simply smiled. The meal was awkward, filled with Mom's attempts to recreate our old family dynamic. Isn't this wonderful? I remember when all four of us used to come here every week. I excused myself early, leaving a 20 on the table. Got an early morning tomorrow. I'm in Hickory first thing. 30 minutes later, I was at Bam's tap room, nursing a double IPA. The usual early evening crowd watched a game on the screen above the bar. Long time no see, stranger. How have you been? Terry slid onto the bar stool beside me, looking damn good as always. One beer led to another, and we ended up at my place. In the morning, she surprised me by pulling me back into bed. Josh, I know we're not going to be a couple, but I'd like things to be normal between us. I agreed, as long as neither of us was in a serious relationship. Later that day, Angela called about Thursday. Her voice made me smile in a way Terry's presence never had. I checked my email from the Sevierville contact. Angela stood to make a substantial amount if she accepted his offer. But when I got home that evening, chaos had already erupted. June and my mom had walked in on Terry lounging in her underwear and one of my cropped t-shirts. A fight broke out. Hair was pulled, makeup smeared, a potted plant sacrificed to the drama. When I arrived home, they were all there, Mom, Dad, and June. Mom started in immediately about strangers coming and going at all hours. Well then, Mom, let me ask you this. How old am I? 30. And how long have I been living on my own? Since you turned 19, I suppose. So, Mom, am I a married man? Well, you were, and you should be Dash. I cut her off. Yes, I was, but I'm not anymore. Do you see how that works? Now, who are these strangers you're talking about? Because as far as I know, there was only one person who ever disrespected this house by cheating on her husband in the bedroom. The room fell silent. June's eyes filled with tears. You could have me, she blurted out. I laughed and took another sip of beer. I did have you, and we both know how that turned out. I laid down new rules about visiting and having company over. Then I took June out to my workshop for a private word. That weekend, Angela and I drove to the dance hall in Asheville. The ring box felt heavy in my pocket. I'd been waiting for the right moment. We danced to a few songs, and I could feel the weight of June's gaze from across the room. She was with a man I didn't recognize, and she seemed content. Then everything went to hell. The blow caught me on the side of my head. Angela screamed, "No, Bill, you can't do this." I swung back instinctively, sending him to the floor. To my surprise, June rushed to help him up. "What the hell, Josh?" June exclaimed, looking confused. "He's my ex-husband," Angela whispered to me. The bouncers escorted Bill out while June excused herself to the restroom. Angela explained Bill's identity to June, who broke down crying. He had been her ride. We offered to drive her home. As we walked to the parking lot, I noticed a flash of white and heard a loud pop. My concealed weapon was in my hand before I consciously drew it. 2 shots, center mass, and Bill Dresser went down. Then Sandra screamed. June lay on her back, blood trickling from a small hole in her right temple. The next hours passed in a blur of emergency rooms and police statements. June survived but fell into a coma. When she woke 4 days later, the world had shifted. She remembered nothing of the past 3 years. Not the affair, not the divorce, not Bill. In her mind, we were still happily married and planning a family. Her doctor warned us that the memories might never return. I stood in the hospital elevator, torn between my past and my future. Angela waited in the lobby while I went to see June. The decision I had to make seemed impossible, but in reality, it was already made. I had moved on, found real love again, and couldn't sacrifice that for someone who had betrayed me, memory or no memory. Angela, bless her heart, took matters into her own hands. She drove to Waynesville one afternoon and sat down with June. She explained everything: the affair, the divorce, our relationship. She showed June understanding and compassion I couldn't have managed. Months passed, and gradually, June accepted the truth even without the memories. She went through depression, but emerged stronger. Eventually, she met someone new, someone who helped her build a fresh start. And somehow, against all odds, we all found our way to forgiveness. Now, a year later, I'm casting my line in a big creek, watching for that elusive brown trout. 2 spiders are parked nearby, mine and Angela's. Two more pull up, June and her new partner joining us for an afternoon of fishing. The past is behind us, but not forgotten. My parents still adore June, and they've grown to love Angela just as much. Life is a way of working itself out if you give it time and space to heal. Last night, Angela told me I'm going to be a father. The news filled me with a joy I never thought I'd feel again. Standing here by the creek, watching these strong women who become unlikely friends, I realized something profound. Sometimes it takes losing everything you thought you wanted to find what you really need. Sometimes the worst betrayal can lead you down a mountain road to your best possible life. And sometimes, in the heart of the Smoky Mountains, broken things come back together in ways you never expected. I cast my line again, the flash of my wedding ring catching the sunlight. Angela's arm slips around my waist, and I catch the scent of her shampoo mixing with the mountain air. June laughs at something her partner said, the sound free of the pain that once haunted us all. The dogs bark playfully from the shoreline. And life is exactly as it should be. Got something planned for tonight? Angela asks, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Thought we might try that new place in Gatlinburg. I reply, celebrate our news. She smiles, and I see our whole future in that smile. The baby, the farm, the life we're building together. The past may have shaped us, but it doesn't define us anymore. The late afternoon sun paints the mountains gold, and a cool breeze carries the promise of autumn. Tomorrow, we'll face whatever comes next: doctor's appointments, nursery plans, all the challenges of bringing new life into this world. But today, we're just here, together, on this peaceful stretch of creek. And that's more than enough. I think about the night I first pulled into Angela's driveway with a blown radiator hose. About all the twists and turns that led us here, to this moment. About how love can surprise you when you least expect it, on a mountain road you've driven past a dozen times before. And I realize that sometimes, the best stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with something far more real. They end with a second chance, hard-won and honest. They end with forgiveness, freely given and gratefully received. They end with a family pieced together from broken parts, stronger at the mended places. They end with hope, not just for what could be, but for what already is. The fish aren't biting much today, but nobody seems to mind. We've all caught something far more valuable than trout. We've caught a glimpse of what life can be when you let go of the past and embrace the present. When you find the courage to love again, to trust again, to begin again. And as the sun sets behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I know one thing for certain. This is where I belong, with Angela, with our growing family, with this complicated, beautiful life we've built. The road ahead may not always be smooth, but we'll travel it together. And that makes all the difference in the world.